Have you ever wondered why some people can't let go of who you used to be? Why, no matter how much you've grown, there's always someone eager to bring up your lowest moment? Like a broken record looping the worst part of your story? It's not random, it's not harmless, and it's not always about you. This episode is based on the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy, the kind of grounded, clear-eyed thinking that helps you stand still in the face of emotional storms. Stoicism teaches us to control what we can, our responses, our values, our direction, and to release what we can't, other people's opinions, projections, or outdated versions of who they think we are. When someone keeps bringing up your past, it's not always because they're seeking truth. Sometimes it's because your growth unsettles the parts of them that have stayed unchanged. Your healing exposes their refusal to heal. And your power? It shakes the foundation of the control they used to have. In this episode, we'll walk through 7 powerful reasons why people keep dragging your past into the present, and how to respond, not with anger, but with wisdom, not with revenge, but with detachment. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming untouchable. So if you've ever felt held back by who you used to be, or by people who refuse to let you move forward, this message is for you. Let's begin. Part 1. They use your past to control you. Not everyone brings up your past to understand you. Some do it to control you. They're not curious. They're not concerned. They're calculated. They've seen you in your lowest moments. When you broke, when you bled, when you failed. And now they carry those memories like receipts, ready to slam them on the table whenever you start to shine. At first, it might sound like advice. Don't get ahead of yourself. Remember what happened last time. But underneath those words is a threat. I need you to stay where I'm comfortable seeing you. What they're really saying is, your growth unsettles me. Your strength makes me feel small. Your healing threatens the version of you I learned to control. And this is exactly where Stoicism gives us our first line of defense. Epictetus once said, "Do not hand over your peace to the judgment of others." That isn't just philosophy, that's self-preservation. Because the moment you let someone else define your worth through the lens of who you used to be, you've given them control over your present. They'll keep bringing up the old you, not to help you grow, but to interrupt your momentum, to create doubt where there should be direction, to keep you shackled to a story that no longer fits the person you've become. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that you've already outgrown. Let that sink in. You don't owe anyone. You're not on trial. Your life is not a courtroom. You don't have to keep defending your past just to justify your present. When someone tries to weaponize your history, the most powerful response is not anger. It's not an argument. It's calm clarity. You know who you are. You know what you've survived. You've earned your freedom the moment you chose to grow. And if they can't see that, let them stay in their story. You don't live there anymore. The past doesn't get to sit in the driver's seat of your life. Not anymore. Part 2. They haven't healed themselves. There's a truth that most people can't admit, even to themselves. Some individuals will never let you evolve because they're emotionally stuck in the version of you that made them feel safe. The old you, the one who was confused, reactive, lost. That version didn't challenge their comfort. That version didn't hold up a mirror. But now that you've changed, now that you've stepped into your strength, they don't know how to relate to you anymore. It's not that they're holding you accountable. It's that your transformation makes them uncomfortable. And instead of rising with you, they try to pull you back. Not to help, not out of concern, but because your growth reminds them of everything they haven't done yet. While you were healing, they were hiding. While you were building peace, they were clinging to pain. And here's what the Stoics understood better than anyone. Unprocessed pain doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It projects. Seneca said, "He who clings to pain cannot walk forward." And when someone refuses to confront their own wounds, they will try to make sure you don't escape yours. That's why they bring up your past. That's why they won't stop talking about who you used to be. Because deep down, They're not trying to help you grow. They're trying to pull you back to the level where they still feel emotionally in control. If they can reduce you to your mistakes, your flaws, your failures, they don't have to face their own. You've seen this play out in real life. Maybe it was someone who beat addiction, rebuilt their confidence, found purpose. And yet, when they went home for the holidays, old friends made passive jokes. Remember when you used to? Don't go getting all fancy now. Those aren't just harmless jabs. They're subtle attempts to drag you back to an old dynamic, because your progress makes their stillness too obvious. Your self-discipline magnifies their apathy. Your boundaries threaten the roles they've grown used to playing. So rather than celebrate you, they mock you. They cling to a memory instead of meeting the person standing in front of them. And what does Stoicism tell us to do when we face this kind of resistance? It says, don't attend every emotional tug-of-war you're invited to. You're not required to explain your healing to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. You're not obligated to slow your stride for someone who's standing still on purpose. The Stoics taught that we only control our own mind, our own choices, our own judgments, not theirs, not their bitterness, not their comfort zone. So, the next time someone reminds you of the person you used to be, don't take the bait. Let them talk. Let them hold on to that version of you. You're no longer there. You've moved on. And you don't need them to come with you. The way you walk, the way you speak, the way you handle life now, that speaks louder than anything they try to resurrect. Let them stay anchored to the past. You've got work to do. You've got a future that doesn't wait. And above all, you've got nothing left to prove. Part 3. They fear your growth. Sometimes, the most unexpected resistance doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you once trusted to celebrate you, the friends who cheered you on when you were down, the family who claimed they just wanted the best for you. But as soon as you start rising, the room gets quiet. Their tone changes, their support fades into sarcasm, and suddenly you realize it's not that they don't see your growth, it's that your growth makes them uneasy. It unsettles them. Because when someone close to you starts to evolve, it challenges everyone who's stayed the same. And growth, real growth, is disruptive. It breaks unspoken contracts, it shifts group dynamics, it forces people to look inward. And most people aren't ready for that level of honesty with themselves. So instead of rising with you, they try to pull you back. Not overtly, not aggressively, but subtly, through jokes that sting a little too much, through reminders of mistakes you've already healed from, through backhanded compliments that say more about their discomfort than your success. You've probably heard it before. You've changed, they say, like it's an insult. Don't forget where you came from, or even you think you're better than us now. But those aren't reflections of who you are. They're reflections of what they're afraid to become. Because your confidence exposes their insecurity, your peace makes their chaos harder to ignore. Your discipline forces them to question their habits, and rather than face that discomfort, they retreat into ridicule. They pretend your growth isn't real. They label it a phase. They reduce it to luck, anything to avoid the mirror you've become. I once knew someone named Nicole. In her 20s, she was a mess, lost, hurt, caught in cycles of pain. But she chose herself. She went to therapy, she got sober, she built new routines, new values, a new life. And yet, when she visited old friends, they didn't ask about her new business. They didn't care about her peace. They brought up the nights she couldn't remember, the men she regretted, the jobs she got fired from. They laughed like they were reminiscing. But deep down, Nicole saw it for what it was, a desperate attempt to reduce her to the version of herself they felt most comfortable around. And that's when the words of Marcus Aurelius clicked in her soul. The one who seeks your past fears your present power. These people weren't blind to her transformation. They were terrified of it. Because her stability made their dysfunction impossible to hide. Her evolution demanded that they re-examine the stories they'd built around her, and they weren't ready for that. So Nicole stopped performing. She stopped trying to fit into rooms that no longer fit her. She didn't argue, she didn't explain. She simply withdrew the version of herself they refused to meet, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Because when someone fears your growth, they'll do anything to shrink it. They'll reduce it to a joke, a memory, a warning. But the Stoic path teaches us that we don't exist to comfort the stagnant. We exist to become. And no one, not a friend, not a parent, not an old version of yourself, gets to demand that you stay small to make them feel better. So keep growing, even if it makes others uncomfortable, especially then, because the people who truly love you will grow with you, and the ones who don't, let them cling to the past. You're not there anymore. Part 4. They refuse to accept the new you. There's a particular kind of pain that comes with growth. Not the pain of failure, not the pain of effort, but the pain of being misunderstood on purpose. Because nothing stings more than realizing some people see your growth and still choose to ignore it. You've done the work. You've bled in silence. You've rebuilt yourself, layer by layer, truth by truth, one hard choice after another. And now you stand taller, speak clearer, love deeper, set boundaries, live with intention. But to them, you're still the old version, still the person who messed up, who broke down, who didn't know better. And it's not because they can't see the new you, it's because they refuse to. Accepting your growth would force them to rewrite the story they've held onto for too long, a story where they were stronger, where they were needed, where they were superior. But now that you've changed, that power dynamic has shifted, and instead of growing with you, they cling harder to their version of you. They joke about your past like it's still your present. They mock your boundaries. They treat your transformation like a performance, not a reality, not because they're blind, but because accepting who you are now would require them to see you as someone who outgrew their narrative, and that would mean reevaluating themselves. And for many people, that's far more uncomfortable than holding onto a false image of you. Change is confronting, it's inconvenient, it demands emotional labor, and most people would rather dismiss your progress than do that work. So they pretend. They pretend your growth isn't real. They pretend your discipline is temporary. They pretend your clarity is ego. All so they can stay comfortable in the illusion that you're still who you used to be. Because if you've evolved, if you've healed, if you've moved forward, then what excuse do they have for staying stuck? Look at someone like Robert Downey Jr. He went from being known as a cautionary tale, addiction, arrests, chaos, to becoming one of the most respected and iconic actors of his generation. He didn't just change careers, he changed himself. But for years after his comeback, critics and even some fans couldn't let go of who he once was. They clung to the drama, the failure, the downfall, not because it was the full truth, but because it was easier than admitting that redemption is real, that people can change, that a new chapter can be written, and if someone like him could rise, what did that say about everyone else still hiding behind their excuses? This is why Stoicism becomes not just philosophy, but a survival tool. Epictetus wrote, "You are not bound to who you were. Grow with reason and let the past be dust." You don't owe anyone the old version of you. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your healing. Your transformation is not arrogance. It's not performance. It's not rebellion. It's a reflection of the truth you chose to face, the pain you chose to process. And if someone can't accept the person you are now, it's not your job to shrink until they feel comfortable. It's their job to grow up and catch up, or step aside. So what do you do when people refuse to meet the new you? You stop begging them to. You stop seeking approval from people committed to misunderstanding your journey. You let your actions speak. You let your boundaries teach. You stop explaining your light to those who've decided to live in shadow. And you keep going, with or without their permission. Because the people who truly matter, the ones aligned with your truth, they will see you, they will honor your growth, and they will walk with you, not behind you, not against you, but beside you. Part 5. They don't respect your journey. One of the most revealing signs that someone doesn't truly respect you is how they treat your transformation. If they reduce you to a version of yourself that you've already buried, If they keep referencing the chapter where you fell instead of the one where you rose, then they're not honoring your journey. They're clinging to a narrative that makes them feel superior. It doesn't matter how many nights you stayed up confronting your own darkness. It doesn't matter how many times you got back up after falling. To them, you're still the person who failed, still the one who got it wrong. And that's not about truth, it's about control. Because when someone refuses to acknowledge how far you've come, it's often because your progress threatens their position. You were once the one who needed saving, the one who stayed silent, the one who was easy to laugh at. But now you walk with power, you speak with confidence, you carry peace like armor. And that disrupts the emotional structure they were comfortable in. Respecting your journey would require humility. It would demand they admit, "You've changed." Or worse, "You've grown beyond me." And most people can't say that. So instead, they pretend. They pretend your healing is fake, that your discipline won't last, that the new you is just a phase. Because admitting the truth would shine a light on how long they've stayed exactly the same. They act like the past is the full story, like the moment you broke was the only moment that mattered. But you and I both know that was just the turning point. That was just the moment the fire began. Everything that came after, the rebuilding, the self-awareness, the boundaries, the courage to start again, that is the real story. That is the part they conveniently leave out. Because that version of you is harder to mock, harder to dismiss, harder to control. Take someone like Matthew Perry. His struggles were public. His addiction, his pain, it was all out there for the world to see. And for years, that's all people talked about. But what most didn't acknowledge was the strength it took for him to turn that pain into purpose. He used his experience to help others. He spoke openly about mental health. He took ownership of his past without being owned by it. And yet, for many, he was still the guy who couldn't get it together. Because acknowledging his strength would mean giving up the comfort of their old narrative. And some people would rather label you as broken than accept the fact that you rebuilt yourself. That's why Stoic wisdom is essential here. Marcus Aurelius said, "Judge not the man by his past, but by the direction of his stride." Respect isn't about pretending someone never made mistakes. It's about recognizing the strength it takes to rise from them. It's about honoring the direction, not the detour. And if someone refuses to see that, you don't need to drag them into your light. You just need to keep walking. Because your progress isn't for them to validate. Your story isn't for them to approve. If they can't see the full picture, that's their blindness, not your burden. You don't have to rewind your growth just to fit the frame of someone who only sees you through the lens of your past. You don't have to tone yourself down so they can stay emotionally comfortable. That's not your job. That's not your path. You earned your evolution. You fought for it. You lived it. And you don't owe it to anyone who refuses to respect the road you took to get here. Let them stay focused on the part where you fell. You've already moved on to the part where you fly. Part 6. They want to keep you stuck. There's a cruel strategy people use when they fear your growth. They dress up their control as concern. They use soft words to hide sharp intentions. And what looks like a reminder is actually a trap. Because some people don't want to see you rise. They don't want to see you free. What they really want is for you to stay stuck. Not out of hate, but out of habit. Because as long as you're stuck, they don't have to grow. As long as you're trapped in your past, they don't have to face theirs. So they use your lowest moments like leashes. Every time you start to walk away from who you used to be, they tug. With old stories, with friendly warnings, with subtle guilt trips. They bring up the time you failed, the time you fell, the time you lost control. And it sounds like they're just being cautious, but if you listen closely, you'll hear the truth. I need you to stay where I left you. Because if you grow, I can't excuse why I haven't. And if you're not grounded in who you are, that tactic works. Because guilt, especially unearned guilt, is heavy. It doesn't just weigh you down, it clouds your judgment. It makes you doubt your progress. It makes you question if you even deserve the healing you've worked so hard to earn. You start walking slower, speaking softer. You start shrinking, not out of humility, but out of shame someone else handed you. But here's what Epictetus made clear. Guilt unearned is a chain forged by manipulation. That kind of guilt is not a reflection of who you are. It's a weapon. And the people who use it know exactly what they're doing. Because if you feel like you still owe penance for the past, they can control how fast you rise, how loud you speak, how big you dream. They don't have to lift themselves up. They just have to keep you small. Think of someone like Jamie Lee Curtis. She spent years in the shadows of addiction and self-doubt, but she didn't stay there. Through honesty, discipline, and relentless self-reflection, she turned her pain into purpose. She became an icon, not for perfection, but for growth. And yet, even now, some people still bring up who she used to be, as if her past could somehow invalidate her present. But that's not how healing works. Your past may be part of your story, but it doesn't get to dictate your future. Unless you give it that power. So, what do you do when someone keeps trying to trap you in the person you used to be? You refuse to carry shame that isn't yours. You stop apologizing for outgrowing the roles they assigned you. You stop engaging in conversations designed to shrink you back into silence, because your growth doesn't need permission. It doesn't require their comfort, and it certainly doesn't have to fit into the narrative they've built around your pain. Let them stay in the chapter where they last felt in control. Let them quote the lines they memorized from the version of you that no longer exists. You've moved on. You've rewritten yourself, and your new story is none of their business, unless they're willing to turn the page. You don't owe anyone the comfort of your stagnation. You don't have to keep shrinking just because it makes them feel safe. If they can't rise with you, let them stay where they are. You've got a new direction, a higher standard, and a future that refuses to wait for anyone who's still trying to chain you to who you were. Part 7. They're testing your emotional weak spots. Sometimes, when someone brings up your past, it's not because they care. It's not because they want closure. And it's definitely not because they believe in who you are today. No, sometimes they bring up your past to test you, to poke at your healing, to press on old scars just to see if they still hurt. They're not seeking understanding. They're looking for reaction. It's not love, it's strategy, and it's one of the most subtle, dangerous forms of manipulation there is. They want to know, can they still reach the part of you that used to flinch? Can they still provoke the anger, the guilt, the defensiveness? Can they still pull you back into a version of yourself that no longer exists? That's why they don't yell, they don't confront. Instead, they make it sound like a joke, like a casual memory. Remember when you used to be like that? Don't get too ahead of yourself. It seems harmless, but underneath there's a test. They want to see if you'll react, if you'll defend, if you'll shrink back into insecurity just long enough for them to feel like they still have power over you. And if you do, if you stumble, explain, over-justify, they win. Not because they're stronger, but because they've triggered the old emotional pathways you worked so hard to close. This is why Stoicism isn't just philosophy, it's armor. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "He who cannot be provoked holds the highest power." And when someone tries to bait you with your past and you don't bite, not because you're avoiding, but because you've outgrown the need to respond, you take back all the control. Stillness becomes your greatest answer. Not coldness, not silence born from fear, but calm, rooted in clarity. You don't react because you don't need to. You know who you are. You've done the work. You've cried through the truth and survived the transformation. And no one, no memory, no manipulation gets to take that away from you. Think of Serena Williams. For years, she was provoked by critics, by media, by subtle and not so subtle attacks on her identity, her power, her presence. And yet, she didn't crumble. She didn't respond with words. She responded with focus, with excellence, with mastery. She let her growth speak louder than any attempt to pull her backward. And eventually, they stopped trying because they couldn't reach her anymore. Her composure made her untouchable. That's what real power looks like. So what do you do when they test your emotional weak spots? You let the test fail. You let them throw their lines into the water. And you don't bite, you don't flinch, you don't explain, you simply stay still. Because the most powerful response to emotional manipulation is not rage, it's non-reactivity. The calm refusal to let anyone else write your story for you. They want the old you, the insecure you, the one who needed their approval. But that version no longer exists. And if they can't reach you, eventually, they stop trying, or they fall away. Either way, you win, because your life is no longer shaped by the need to prove yourself to people who only knew how to love your wounds, not your healing. You've closed that chapter, you've locked that door, and now your strength is in knowing that not everyone deserves access to the peace you've earned. Conclusion: you are not your past, you are your next chapter. So now you understand. When they keep bringing up your past, it's not a reflection of who you are, it's a reflection of who they need you to be. Because if you've truly changed, then they have to question why they haven't. If you've healed, grown, risen, they're forced to ask themselves why they're still stuck. And most people don't want to do that. It's easier to drag you back than to rise with you. It's easier to reduce you than to expand themselves. So they tell the same story, recycle the same memory, repeat the same lines. Not because they love truth, but because they fear transformation. If you don't know, then you certainly don't know. You've seen behind the curtain. You've walked the long road of healing, not just once, but every single day you choose to become. You're not who you used to be, and you don't need permission to keep going. You don't need applause. You don't need their understanding. Your life is not a courtroom. You don't owe a testimony for every moment you've evolved. You don't owe anyone the right to define you by a page you've already turned. The Stoics remind us, your peace is yours to protect, your growth is yours to honor, and your direction, not your history, is what defines you. Let them talk, let them doubt. Let them hold onto the old version of you like it still exists, because it doesn't, and you know it. That's enough. So stand in your present, own your truth. Walk forward like someone who has nothing left to prove, because you don't. You've done the work, you've survived the worst, you've stepped into the light, and now your job is to protect it, not explain it. If this message found a place in your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who's still wrestling with their old story. Let them know they're not alone. And if you're walking this road with us, growing quietly but powerfully, I'd love for you to subscribe to The Chill Stoic, because here we don't just survive our past, we outgrow it. Let them keep rereading the pages you've already left behind. You're too busy writing your next chapter.